Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of GFA Attract, our interview series where we interact and speak with business leaders about everything and anything. Today, we have Somet Kipchilat, who works with Microsoft, specifically Microsoft's for Africa initiative. And he's going to be sharing his insights on what Microsoft is trying to achieve in Africa and on the African ecosystem space. So, Somet, once again, thank you so much for joining us. Could you just let our audience meet you? Who is Somet? How did you get here? What have you been doing professionally? Just let's meet you professionally. Yeah.
All right, wonderful. First of all, let me say thank you for this opportunity to have this discussion with you. So Somet is passionate about technology. So I started off my career early, actually, while I was still in university, and I started out by volunteering. So I used to volunteer to do trainings and startups, and I got the opportunity to lead what was then called the Microsoft Student Partners. It's now called the Microsoft Student Ambassadors Program. Out of my university, and that gave me the opportunity to definitely be a technical ambassador across my campus. I slowly then got an opportunity to intern into Microsoft, and I started off in what was called the developer experience team, and my responsibility was looking at developer engagement across all audiences, so whether it was students or professional developers. So I did that for a couple of months, and then joined the For Africa team, of which I'm still a part of till today. And I started off again as a technical, what was called a technical evangelist, sort of carrying over the same job that I had. Then did that for a couple of years, and then slowly transitioned into the business side of things. I did do work around partner development, so sort of working on building Microsoft's partner ecosystem in East Africa, and I have now transitioned back into working very closely with startups as a business development manager, and that is who I am.
Thank you. So let me just get this right. Originally, where are you from and where are you presently located? Meaning, where do you work out of?
All right, I am born and raised in Kenya. I work in Kenya, and I am in Kenya right now. But definitely had the opportunity to travel all across the continent.
Okay, that's a good question. Across the continent, what kind of countries have you been to, and what was the last African country you visited outside Kenya?
The last one was actually early this year. I was in Kigali for a conference.
Rwanda?
And that's last Africa. Yes, Rwanda.
Okay. All right, that's good to know. Okay, so your role covers engagement for Sub-Saharan Africa under Microsoft's, like you mentioned, for Africa initiative. Could you please summarize what this is about? What does Microsoft actually aim to achieve?
All right. I'll sort of give you a background a bit about how Microsoft is structured. So, Microsoft has been on the continent approximately about 30 years now. And purely for the longest time, we've been a very commercial organization. About 7 years ago, the company looked at, how does it make strategic investments on the continent that definitely will not only foster the growth of the continent, but also, the growth of Microsoft business. As we slowly started moving into the cloud, it became imperative that we start looking at, what are the drivers to such adoption of that kind of technology. And we did identify under the For Africa initiatives a couple of areas in which the company could go ahead and start investing early. One very key one was connectivity. So we realized there's a huge gap in terms of connectivity on the continent. And so as we slowly looked at transitioning into the cloud world, that would become a challenge for doing business here, but also, it's a bigger challenge for the continent. And we did quite some interesting projects around TV white spaces, that is using the unconnected, the gaps in between the old UHF spectrum to transmit low cost bandwidth on the continent. So we did that in Kenya as a pilot and then spread it out across 18 countries. And today it is a fully funded division in Microsoft run at a global level called the Airband Initiative. We then now looked at, how do we enable people with the relevant skills to take advantage not only of the connectivity, but the access to the internet and the opportunities that cloud and technology came with. And so we've done quite a number of skills programs that is around internships, around getting Microsoft employees to spend their time supporting different organizations. We built skills programs with different organizations and partners across the continent. And so we could run quite a huge skills team within the For Africa organization. But key and central to that was startups. Startups were the key drivers of business and sort of their next frontier. And so part of the For Africa initiative and for the work that I've actually been doing for the last about 5 years now, is a startup program. So I've with a very great team have been working in supporting startups all across the continent for the last couple of years, and that's sort of what Microsoft has done. About a year ago, we also looked at investing in a fully fledged engineering center, and that sort of was to give an opportunity for the great talent that we have on the continent to actually build solutions world class. So the Windows and Azure and Office 365 that you use today, parts of it will actually be built on the continent. So that is sort of where Microsoft is and what we do on the continent.
Yes, and for sure we have more great talents in Africa. We just need to unlock them and provide the conducive environment, as they say, for them to actually achieve their objectives. It's interesting that you mentioned work around connectivity and Microsoft's interest in that. So Get Funded Africa's research arm, it's a company called Afriscaper Research and Markets, actually did some work with a company called CarUS. I'm sure you've heard about them. They're very large in the mobile operating system space. And we did a project for them on mobile internet connectivity in Nigeria. And it was very interesting in terms of the data and the kind of information that we received, because like you said, it's very clear that this is the lack of internet, lack of accessibility to internet is a huge barrier to so many socio-economic issues that we have, and especially in terms of business. Okay, thank you for that. So let's dig a bit deeper into your role and what you know about the startup ecosystem. So how would you advise African startups to actually develop business models based on technologies? What Microsoft solutions can actually help in this regard?
So one of the interesting things I have come across the continent is, we have quite some really, really innovative solutions that are being built on the continent. I think from my perspective, the sad part is a lot of these organizations are still using the old traditional business models to try and sell technology, which at some point sort of doesn't work. So if you think about it today, a lot of companies are still using this model of, if I want to sell software to a company, I will go sit with that company, have a meeting, go do requirements gathering, do all these research, go back, write code, come back and present the thing. So it's an old traditional way of selling technology. While if you look at today, the different platforms, and I think the COVID-19 pandemic has sort of pushed us to the boundary of looking at how do we build solutions and actually sell them without necessarily having that physical interaction. If you think about, let me give an example. If you look at your phone today, how do you buy mobile apps from your store? You go to a store, you download an app, and you never have to interact with the developer of the app. Why not do the same thing with other software? And I think that's where there's a very interesting opportunity. So there's quite a number of platforms that now allow startups and to really take that solution and sell it and build it in such a way that you completely change the customer experience. So you don't have to go through this back and forth with your customer to get them to buy a solution. You want to make it as easy as them clicking to buy your solution. So I think that's one way. But number two is also looking at the technology that you have. I believe that amongst a lot of the startups that have come, there are very few who actually fully utilize the technology that they have access to. So there's a lot of companies trying to build all these cool things, but because I think of lack of skills and exposure, very few engineers actually go deep to understand, if I'm building on containers, what is containers and what what can that fully do for me? We, I think, explore maybe 20% of it, and then we get excited and build this thing, not really, and we end up writing a lot of code that we shouldn't have. So I think there's enough platforms that should allow businesses to really build rapidly without necessarily having to go back and write code from scratch. And I think developers get caught up in, I want to write the code, I want to write the scripts, while the business is looking at, I want to solve a solution really fast. So I think there's quite a number of areas of sort of growth and adoption of what technology can do, which I think is key. And then I think the last thing is we collect a lot of data, but I don't think we fully utilize the power of data. I don't think we've fully explored what data can do and transform how we do business, changing how we make decisions for the kind of customers that we serve. So I think that there's a lot of opportunities for that kind of transformation.
Okay, so you said something about building rapidly, and that actually just transitions straight into the next question from the startup point of view, especially. So as you definitely know, in the startup ecospace, the word scalability is a big buzzword. You hear it all the time, and we want to actually get a clear understanding of what reality is from fantasy. So how would you advise startups to actually identify genuine scalable business models, market opportunities that can scale across Africa?
Sorry, I lost you there for a second.
Oh, okay. I said in terms of scalability, it's a big buzzword. A lot of startups and founders actually talk about how they can grow their businesses from A to Z within a very limited time. So we're trying to actually differentiate what is reality and what is fantasy. How do you advise startups to actually tell themselves or identify genuine scalable business models that can actually scale across different markets in Africa?
I think one of the interesting things that technology unlocks is the availability of, the reality of no boundaries. I think the one reality we need to understand that as you try and scale your business across the continent, you will realize that the different areas in which you operate are heavily fragmented. If you look at legislation in Kenya versus Uganda versus Tanzania, just scaling across that is difficult if you're doing, brick and mortar tech business. Now, if you look at what technology then allows you to do is build that interesting solution that solves a problem in Ghana and port that same solution to Philippines without necessarily having to set up shop there. And I think technology does do quite an interesting, give us an interesting opportunity to do that in terms of scaling. Another opportunity for scale is looking at partnerships. Looking at how do I work with other organizations to be able to scale my solution? Am I spending too much time trying to own and completely have everything within my ecosystem, or am I willing to actually partner with other organizations? And take Microsoft as a good example. We don't have an office in every country in Africa. We have very few offices on the continent, but we leverage on a huge network of partners to scale our business. In fact, 94% of our business globally does come from partners. And sort of that's how we scale. We look at, we've built a platform, and then we allow all these organizations to come in and look at, how do they build, take and extend what we've built and really take that to market and commercialize it. So we think of ourselves as a platform company. We're not going to come here and give an example, a healthcare solution end to end. No, that's not the core of what we do. But we're going to give you the right technology infrastructure, the cloud, that then enables you to focus on the core of what your business is without necessarily having to worry too much about the infrastructure. So, being able to leverage on engines like those, and there's quite a number of organizations that have built those kind of platforms that would allow you to really quickly accelerate how fast you scale. So I think that's a very interesting way that we can look at scale. And definitely you will hear it as a buzzword, but it's where I don't think we fully look at scale. I mean, I'd love a situation where a company would start thinking, how do we build locally relevant solutions that have a global impact?
Yeah. Okay, it's interesting you mentioned partnerships, because another element that we see a lot is that I don't know if it's because founders are trying to protect their businesses, they're afraid that people are going to steal their business ideas. Partnerships in terms of building an ecosystem, even on a very small scale, are actually very important. The founders are very reluctant to do this at times, and it sort of seems to be the same thing affecting their understanding of how equity works. When you tell them that an investor wants to take equity in their businesses, they become very overprotective. How would you advise startup founders to open their eyes in terms of trends such as you have spoken about, and Microsoft depends largely on partnerships, and why they should not be afraid of giving out equity in their companies in exchange for investments?
Right. And I think you're spot on. I think one of the biggest challenges African entrepreneurs have is we get completely married to our ideas. We find it very hard to let go and to learn from others. So even when there is definitely an opportunity for you to partner with someone or for someone to come in and bring scale, then it becomes a challenge. I think the first step that we need to do as Africans is to have sort of a mindset shift to understand that that idea that sits in your head does no one any good, and it doesn't mean that you're the only person who thought about it. So go out there, do it fast. I think there's a famous speaker who once said, in terms of competition, if someone can do what you do cheaper, better, faster, then my God unto you, your business will be So I always encourage startups to not get too caught up in, oh, I want to own this idea, I want to do this thing, but look at, how do I fail fast? I think Reid Hoffman from LinkedIn says this all the time. The idea is fail fast. If the thing is not working, fail, pick up, move on, learn. Not get completely caught up in, I call them cosmetics. There are definitely a number of and opportunities, and I think we tend to get bogged down and caught up in the fancy the fancy areas that startups use, the buzzwords, the blockchains, AIs. Yet they're very simple, clear opportunities that a lot of startups can leverage on. A good example is serving enterprises. A lot of enterprises have very interesting needs that a lot of startups could serve, and you could just focus at one thing and really be good at it. I'll give another good example. I think African startups try to solve a very wide base of problem that you end up getting completely confused and caught up in a number of things.
Yes.
I think there's an opportunity if startups could really focus on one tiny little thing and do that really, really well, and then look at, how do they scale that out? How do they find similar clients? And you look at, that's what corporates are looking for. A corporate is not looking for somebody who's doing exactly the same thing as them. They're looking for solve that one tiny little problem that they have, and somebody who has a lot of agility. So I think there's quite a number of opportunities if only we could look at, how do we become very clear and articulate about the very clear problem that we're solving, but also really, having that mindset shift to understand that, it doesn't always revolve around us. And sometimes, things will go south and it's okay, and you can go pick up and continue. I think sometimes we get too caught up in this whole idea of, we feel entitled, for lack of a better way of describing it.
Yeah, you're right. And just to summarize part of what you said earlier in this last question, there is nothing new under the sun. And if founders and entrepreneurs think that, whatever business idea is in their head is going to become the next big thing until it's executed, then nothing actually happens. And it's interesting because that takes us into our next question. It has to do with go-to-market. So African startups, like what you have said already, have a lot of innovative ideas. There's a lot of talent on the continent. But startups struggle with their go-to-market strategy. What advice do you have for startups on how to improve this?
So in terms of go-to-market, I think it really heavily depends on, what kind of format your business is. So if you think about it, B2B, that their go-to-market might be slightly different. I think one learning I think I've picked up over time is that consumer businesses or B2C businesses are businesses that require you to really rapidly change and grow. Because your consumers are human beings are very interesting people.
Yes.
The next person who comes up with a shiny new thing, we will all move. Yeah, but if you look at B2B, they seem to be a bit more structured and sort of long term. And if you actually look at the big 5 companies in the world, you will actually see that difference. The companies like Apple, who are very consumer centric, have to constantly and rapidly change and come up with a new product all the time. But if you look at organizations that are very B2B focused, they have a longer leeway to do a lot of things. Where it makes it even more fun is the B2B side, and I think that's where a lot of startups have solutions. If we could really transform and reinvent the customer experience, so sometimes, especially when you're going to try to sell to a business, you get caught up in all these structures of it has to go through legal, procurement, all these things. Yet, if you think about it, and I'll give you a good example of a platform that very few companies have utilized, is what Microsoft calls a Microsoft Commercial Marketplaces. Okay. And this is for any startups who's listening, here's a very good way to go to market. So Microsoft realized that we sell a lot of technology to companies, but then there's also all these startups and partners and companies that are trying to sell to the same businesses. So we looked at how do we sort of bring that together, where there's a guy who can really solve the problem of one of our customers. How do we bundle those 2 platforms together? So how do we take this healthcare management solution, bundle it together with our cloud or Office 365 or whatever technology it is, and then incentivize our sellers to actually go and sell that to the enterprise customer. And that way you actually have a corporate's entire sales engine behind you. So Microsoft has this really interesting platform called the Microsoft Commercial Marketplace. And it has different storefronts. One is focused towards developers, one is focused towards business decision makers. But what we've done is created an ecosystem that our customers can actually buy software. A CIO sitting somewhere at his desk with 3 clicks of a button can actually go and buy that startup solution without ever having to meet them or to actually have this annoying discussions around procurement and collection, and you get caught up in that. So I think that's a very heavily underutilized platform, and I know that a number of other organizations are looking into transforming that that kind of ecosystem. So I think as startups, in terms of go-to-market, if we could really reinvent or rethink, and COVID has given us a very good opportunity to do that. It has. How do we rethink and renovate how we sell technology or solutions to different businesses? And that's what I think about go-to-market.
Okay,